Hello, everybody. Welcome to assignment number 8 of Salem's Lot. Very quickly, no kids. Don't have them near this. The language in this can be incredibly raw. And there's definitely scenes in this. It's mature. Let's just say that. So please get any little kids away or put in your earbuds, please. Okay. We are on for assignment number 8. We are in part 2, The Emperor of Ice Cream, chapter 8, Ben 3, part 2. So again, we are in part 2 of the book. We are in, which is called The Emperor of Ice Cream. We are in chapter 8. This one is Ben 3, and we are in part 2. So let's go. Every window on the lower floor of Matt's house was lit up, and when Ben's headlights splashed across the front as he turned into the driveway, Matt opened the door and waited for him. He came up the walk ready for almost anything, but Matt's face was still a shock. It was deadly pale, and the mouth was trembling. His eyes were wide, and they didn't seem to blink. "Let's go in the kitchen," he said. Ben came in, and as he stepped inside, the half-light caught the cross lying against his chest. "You brought one. It belongs to Eva Miller. What's the matter?" Matt repeated, "In the kitchen." As they passed the stairs leading to the second floor, he glanced upward and seemed to flinch away at the same time. The kitchen table where they had eaten spaghetti was bare now except for 3 items, 2 of them peculiar: a cup of coffee, an old-fashioned class Bible, and a .38 revolver. "Now what's up, Matt? You look awful." "And maybe I dreamed the whole thing, but thank God you're here." He had picked up the revolver and was turning it over restively in his hands. "Tell me, and stop playing with that thing. Is it loaded?" Matt put the pistol down and ran a hand through his hair. "Yes, it's loaded, although I don't think it would do any good. Unless I used it on myself." He laughed, a jagged, unhealthy sound like grinding glass. "Stop that." The harshness in his voice broke the queer, fixed look in his eyes. He shook his head, not like a man propounding a negative, but the way some animals will shake themselves coming out of cold water. "There's a dead man upstairs," he said. "Who?" "Mike Ryerson. He works for the town. He's a groundskeeper." "Are you sure he's dead?" "I am in my guts, even though I haven't looked in on him. I haven't dared, because, in another way, he may not be dead at all." "Matt, you're not talking good sense." "Don't you think I know that? I'm talking nonsense, and I'm thinking madness, but there was no one to call but you. In all of Salem's Lot, you're the only person that might. He shook his head and began again. "We talked about Danny Glick." "Yes, and how he might have died of pernicious anemia, what our grandfathers would have called just wasting away." I just want to make a point. Remember from when we studied our diseases that seemed like vampire diseases back in the old days, 1800s and whatnot. This is absolutely one, pernicious anemia. And it is something that in those times they would have definitely, not all of them, but some superstitious fools would have thought that it could have been vampiric and possibly staked the boy or the person or chopped the head off, did the whole garlic in the mouth and down the neck. You know what I'm talking about. Shh, I'll be quiet. "Yes, Mike buried him, and Mike found Win Puritan's dog impaled on the Harmony Hill Cemetery gates. I met Mike Ryerson and Dells last night, and I couldn't go in," he finished. "I couldn't. I sat on my bed for nearly 4 hours. Then I crept downstairs like a thief and called you. What do you think?" Ben had taken the crucifix off. Now he poked at the glimmering heap of the fine-linked chain with a reflective finger. It was almost 5 o'clock, and the eastern sky was rose with dawn. The fluorescent bar overhead had gone pallid. Excuse me, everybody. "I think we better go up to your guest room and look. That's all I think right now." "The whole thing seems like a madman's nightmare now with the light coming in the window." He laughed shakily. "I hope it is. I hope Mike is sleeping like a baby." "Well, let's go see." Matt firmed his lips with an effort. "Okay." He dropped his eyes to the table and then looked at Ben questioningly. "Sure," Ben said, and slipped a crucifix over Matt's neck. "It actually does make me feel better." He laughed self-consciously. "Do you suppose they'll let me wear it when they cart me off to Augusta?" Ben said, "Do you want the gun?" "No, I guess not. I'd stick it in the top of my pants and blow my balls off." They went upstairs, Ben in the lead. There was a short hall at the top running both ways. At one end, the door to Matt's bedroom stood open, a pale sheet lamplight spilling out onto the orange runner. "Down at the other end," Matt said. Matt walked down the hall and stood in front of the guest room door. He did not believe the monstrosity Matt had implied, but nonetheless he found himself engulfed by a wave of the blackest fright he had ever known. You open the door and he's hanging from the beam. The face swelled and puffed and black, and then the eyes open and they're bulging in the sockets, but they're seeing you and they're glad you came. The memory rose up in almost total sensory reference, and for the moment of its totality, he was paralyzed. He could even smell the plaster and the wild odor of nesting animals. It seemed to him that the plain varnished wood door of Matt Burke's guest room stood between him and all the secrets of a hell. Then he twisted the knob and pushed the door inward. Matt was at his shoulder, and he was holding Aoife's crucifix tightly. The guest room window faced directly east, and the top arc of the sun had just cleared the horizon. The first pellucid rays shone directly through the window, isolating a few golden motes as it fell to a shaft into the white linen sheet that was pulled up to Mike Ryerson's chest. Ben looked at Matt and nodded. "He's all right," he whispered. "Sleeping." Matt said tonelessly. "The window's open. It was closed and locked. I made sure of it." Ben centered on the upper hem of the flawlessly laundered sheet that covered Mike. There was a single small drop of blood on it, dried to maroon. "I don't think he's breathing," Matt said. Ben took 2 steps forward and then stopped. "Mike? Mike Ryerson? Wake up. Mike?" No response. Mike's lashes lay cleanly against his cheeks. His hair was tousled loosely across his brow, and Ben thought that in the first delicate light, he was more than handsome. He was as beautiful as the profile of a Greek statue. Light color bloomed in his cheeks, and his body held none of the deathly pallor Matt had mentioned, only healthy skin tones. "Of course he's breathing," he said a trifle impatiently. "Just fast asleep, Mike." He stretched out a hand and shook Ryerson slightly. Mike's left arm, which had been crossed loosely on his chest, fell limply over the side of the bed, and the knuckles rapped on the floor like a request for entry. Matt stepped forward and picked up the limp arm. He pressed his index finger over the wrist. No pulse. He started to drop it, remembered the grisly knocking noise the knuckles had made, and put the arm across Ryerson's chest. It started to fall anyway, and he put it back more firmly with a grimace. Ben couldn't believe it. He was sleeping. He had to be. The good color, the obvious suppleness of the muscles, the lips half parted as if to draw breath. Unreality washed over him. He placed his wrist against Ryerson's shoulder and found the skin cool. He moistened his finger and held it in front of those half-open lips. Nothing, not a feather of breath. He and Matt looked at each other. "Marks on the neck?" Matt asked. Ben took Ryerson's jaw in his hands and turned it gently until the exposed cheek lay against the pillow. The movement dislodged the left arm, and the knuckles rapped the floor again. There were no marks on Mike Ryerson's neck. 4. They were at the kitchen table again. It was 5:35 a.m. They could hear the lowing of the Griffin cows as they were let into their east pasturage down the hill and beyond the belt of shrubbery and underbrush that screens Taggart Stream from view. "According to folklore, the marks disappear," Matt said suddenly. "When the victim dies, the marks disappear." "I know that," Ben said. He remembered it both from Stoker's Dracula and from the Hammer film starring Christopher Lee. That's funny because we read, my class and I, we read Dracula just today, and we were at the part, well, we didn't read it, but we talked about it. We were at the part where we learned that we have realized that Mina, the minute she dies, she is going to turn into a full vampire. Right now, she's a half-pyre, right? And that's because she was forced to drink. Dracula forced Mina to drink his blood as a punishment for her and them for going after him. Little did he know it was actually going to end up coming back to get him with the whole hypnotism and the fact that he was able to find out where Dracula was through Mina and hypnotism and the link between them. Interesting. Let's continue. Let's just go. According to folklore, the marks disappear, Matt said suddenly. When the victim dies, the marks disappear. I know that. And what I was saying was Mina now knows that when Mina dies, she will become a full vampire, or when she feeds on somebody. So my point is, we now know that this guy laying in the bed, because we just read Dracula, that he is a full vampire now because he is getting all his color back and whatnot. And so he must have had to drink the blood as well. He was drained. He must have had to drink the blood. So he is coming back, and he is going to do some killing as well. So they had better kill this guy, even though he's dead. But you get my point. I know that, Ben said. He remembered both from Stoker's Dracula and from the Hammer film starring Christopher Lee. We have to put an ash stake through its heart. Better think again, Ben said, and sipped his coffee. That would be damned hard to explain to a coroner's jury. You'd go to jail for desecrating a corpse at the very least, more likely to the funny farm. You think I'm crazy, Matt asked quietly. With no discernible hesitation, Ben said, "No. Do you believe me about the marks?" "I don't know. I guess I have to. Why would you lie to me? I can't see any gain for you in a lie. I suppose you'd lie if you had killed them." "Perhaps I did then," Matt said, watching him. There are three things going against it. First, what's your motive? Pardon me, Matt, but you're just too old for the classic ones like jealousy and money to fit very well. Second, what was your method? If it was poison, he must have gone very easily. He certainly looked peaceful enough, and that eliminates most of the common poisons right there. Well, what's your third reason? No murderer in his right mind would invent a story like yours to cover up murder. It would be insane. I don't think you're crazy, Ben said, accenting the first word slightly. You seem rational enough. Oh, I don't think you're crazy, Ben said, accenting the first word slightly. You seem rational enough, but you're not a doctor, are you? No, I'm sorry, not the first word. I don't think you're crazy, Ben said, accenting the first word slightly. You seem rational enough, but you're not a doctor, are you? Matt asked. And crazy people are sometimes able to counterfeit sanity remarkably well. Ben agreed. So where does that put us? Back to square one. No, neither one of us can afford that because there's a dead man upstairs and pretty soon he's going to have to be explained. The constable's going to want to know what happened, and so is the medical examiner, and so is the county sheriff. Nat, could it be that Mike Ryerson was just sick with some virus all week and happened to drop dead in your house? The first time since they'd come back down, Matt showed signs of agitation. Ben, I told you what he said. I saw the marks on his neck, and I heard him invite someone into my house. Then I heard that laugh. His eyes had taken on that peculiar blank look again. All right, Ben said. He got up and went to the window, trying to set his thoughts in order. It didn't go well, and as he had told Susan, things seemed to have a way of getting out of hand. He was looking toward the Marston house. Matt, do you know what's going to happen if you even let out a whisper of what you told me? Matt didn't answer. People are going to start tapping their foreheads behind your back when you go by in the street. Little kids are going to get out their Halloween wax teeth when they see you coming and jump out and yell boo when you walk by their hedge. Somebody will invent a rhyme like 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to suck your blood some more. The high school kids will pick it up and you'll hear it in the halls when you pass. Your colleagues will begin looking at you strangely. There's apt to be anonymous phone calls from people purporting to be Danny Glick or Mike Ryerson. That'll turn your life into a nightmare. They'll hound you out of town in 6 months. They wouldn't. They know me. Ben turned to the window. Who do they know? A funny old duck who lives alone out on Taggart Stream Road? Just the fact that you're not married is apt to make them believe you've got a screw loose anyway. And what backup can I give you? I saw the body, but nothing else. Even if I had, they would just say I was an outsider. They would even get around to telling each other we were a couple of queers, and this was just our way of getting our kicks. Matt was looking at him with slowly dawning horror. One word, Matt. That's all it will take to finish you in Salem's Lot. So there's nothing to be done. Yes, there is. You have a certain theory about who or what killed Mike Ryerson. The theory is relatively simple to prove or disprove, I think. I'm in a hell of a fix. I can't believe you're crazy, but I can't believe that Danny Click here came back from the dead and sucked Mike Ryerson's blood for a whole week before killing him either. But I'm going to put the idea to the test, and you've got to help. How? Call your doctor. Cody is his name. Then call Parkins Gillespie. Let the machinery take over. Tell your story just as though you'd never heard a thing in the night. You went into Dell's. You sat down with Mike. He said he'd been feeling sick since last Sunday. You invited him home with you. You went in to check with him around 3:30 this morning. Couldn't wake him. Me. That's all. That's it. When you speak to Cody, don't even say he's dead. Not dead. Christ, how do we know he is? Ben exploded. You took his pulse and couldn't find it. I tried to friend his breath and couldn't do it. If I thought someone was going to shove me into my grave on that basis, I'd damn well pack a lunch, especially if I looked as lifelike as he does. That bothers you as much as it does me, doesn't it? Yes, it bothers me, Ben admitted. He looks like a goddamn waxwork. All right, Matt said. You're talking sense as much as anyone can in a business like this. I guess I sounded nuts at that. Ben started to deprecate, but Matt waved it off. But suppose, just hypothetically, that my first suspicion is right. Would you want even the remotest possibility in the back of your mind, the possibility that might come back? As I said, that theory is easy enough to prove or disprove, and it is what bothers me about all this. Well, what is? Just a minute. First things first. Proving or disproving it ought to be no more than an exercise in logic, ruling out possibilities. First possibility, Mike died of some disease or virus or something. How do you confirm that or rule it out? Excuse me, everybody. Dang it. Matt shrugged. Medical examination, I suppose. Exactly. And the same method to confirm or rule out foul play. If somebody poisoned him or shot him or got him to eat a piece of fudge with bundles of wires in it. Excuse me. Murder has gone undetected before. Sure it has. But I'll bet on the medical examiner. And if the medical examiner's verdict is unknown cause, then, Ben said deliberately, we can visit the grave after the funeral and see if he rises. If he does, which I can't conceive of, we'll know. If he doesn't, we're faced with the thing that bothers me. The fact of my insanity, Matt said slowly. Ben, I swear in my mother's name that those marks were there, that I heard the window go up, that believe you, Ben said quietly. Matt stopped. His expression was that of a man who had braced himself for a crash that never came. You do? He said uncertainly. To put it another way, I refuse to believe that you're crazy or had a hallucination. I had an experience once, an experience that had to do with that damned house on the hill that makes me extremely sympathetic to people whose stories seem utterly insane in light of rational knowledge. I'll tell you about that one day. Why not now? There's no time. You have those calls to make. And I have one more question. Think about it carefully. Do you have any enemies? No one who qualifies for something like this. An ex-student, maybe, one with a grudge? Matt, who knew exactly to what extent he influenced the lives of his students, laughed politely. Okay, Ben said. I'll take your word for it. He shook his head. I don't like it. First that dog shows up on the cemetery gate, then Ralphie Glick disappears, his brother dies, and Mike Ryerson. Maybe they all tie in somehow, but this, I can't believe it. I better call Cody's home, Matt said, getting up. Parkins will be at home. Call him sick at school, too. Right, Matt laughed at that for us. First sick day in 3 years. A real occasion. He went into the living room and began to make his calls, waiting at the end of each number sequence for the bell to prod sleepers awake. Cody's wife apparently referred him to Cumberland Receiving, for he dialed another number, asked for Cody, and went into a story after a short wait. He hung up and called into the kitchen. Jimmy will be here in an hour. Good, Ben said. I'm going upstairs. Don't touch anything. No. By the time he reached the second floor landing, he could hear Matt on the phone to Parkins Gillespie, answering questions. The words melted into a background murmur as he went down the hall. A feeling of half-remembered, half-imagined terror washed over him again as he contemplated the door to the guest room. In his mind's eye, he could see himself stepping forward, pushing it open. The room looked larger, seen from a child's eye view. The body lies as they left it, left arm dangling to the floor, left cheek pressed against the pillow, which still shows the fold lines from the linen closet. The eyes suddenly open, and they are filled with blank, animalistic triumph. The door slams shut. The left arm comes up, the hand hooked into a claw, and the lips twist into a vulpine smile that shows incisors grown wondrously long and sharp. He stepped forward and pushed the door with tented fingers. The lower hinges squeaked slightly. The body lay as they left it, left arm fallen, left cheek pressed against the pillowcase. Parkins is coming, Matt said from the hallway behind him, and Ben nearly screamed. 5. Ben thought how apt his phrase had been. Let the machinery take over. It was very much like a machine, one of those elaborate German contraptions constructed of clockwork and cogs, figures moving in an elaborate dance. Parkins Gillespie arrived first, wearing a green tie set off by a VFW tie tack. There were still sleepy seeds in his eyes. He told them he had notified the county ME. He won't be out himself, the son of a bitch, Parkins said, tucking a Pall Mall into the corner of his seamed mouth. But he'll send out a deputy and a fella to take pictures. You touch the corpse? His arm fell out of Ben said. I tried to put it back, but it wouldn't stay. Parkins looked him up and down and said nothing. Ben thought of the grisly sound the knuckles had made on the hardwood floor of Matt's guest room and felt the queasy laughter in his belly. He swallowed it to keep it there. Matt led the way upstairs, and Parkins walked around the body several times. Say, you sure he's dead? He asked finally. You tried to wake him up? James Cody, MD, arrived next, fresh from a delivery in Cumberland. After the amenities had passed among them, good to see you, Parkins Gillespie said and lit a fresh cigarette. Matt led them all upstairs again. Now, if we only played instruments, Ben thought, we could give the guy a real send-off. He felt the laughter trying to cup up his throat again. Cody turned back the sheet and frowned down at the body for a moment. With a calmness that astounded Ben, Matt Burke said, "You reminded me of what you said about the Glick boy, Jimmy." That was a privileged communication, Mr. Burke, Jimmy Cody said mildly. If Danny Glick's folks found out you'd said that, they could sue me. Would they win? No, probably not, Jimmy said and sighed. What's this about the Glick boy? Parkins asked, frowning. Nothing, Jimmy said. No connection. He used the stethoscope, muttered, rolled back an eyelid, and shone a light into the glassy orb beneath. Ben saw the pupil contract and said quite audibly, Christ! Interesting reflex, isn't it, Jimmy said. He let the eyelid go, and it rolled shut with grotesque slowness, as if the corpse had winked at them. David Prine at Johns Hopkins reports pupillary contraction in some cadavers up to 9 hours. Now, he's a scholar, Matt said gruffly. He used to pull C's in expository writing. You just didn't like to read about dissections, you old grump, Jimmy said absently, and produced a small hammer. Nice, Ben thought. He retains his bedside manner, even when the patient is, as Parkins would say, a pulse. The dark laughter welled inside him again. He's dead? He dead? Parkins asked, and tapped the ash of a cigarette into an empty flower vase. Matt winced. Oh, he's dead, Jimmy told him. He got up, turned the sheet back to Ryerson's feet, and tapped the right knee. The toes were moveless. Ben noticed that Mike Ryerson had yellow rings of callus on the bottoms of his feet, at the ball of the heel and at the instep. It made him think of the Wallace Stevens poem about the dead woman. Let it be the finale of Seam, he quoted. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. Matt looked at them sharply, and for a moment his control seemed to waver. What's that? Parkins asked. A poem, Matt said. It's from a poem about death. Sounds more like a good humor man to me, Parkins said, and tapped his ash into the vase again. I want to read that quote again, by the way. Let it be the finale of Seam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. And it's about death. That's just very interesting. Stephen King's weird like that. May I continue for another moment or two? 6. I won't go very far, so remember 6. Have we been introduced? Jimmy asked, looking up at Ben. You were, but only in passing, Matt said. Jimmy Cody, local quack. Me, Ben Mears, local hack, and vice versa. He's always been clever that way, Jimmy said. That's how he made all his money. They shook hands over the body. Help me turn him over, Mr. Mears. A little squeamishly, Ben helped him turn the body on its belly. The flesh was cool, not yet cold, still pliant. Jimmy stared closely at the back, then pulled the jockey shorts down from the buttocks. What's that for? Parkins asked. I'm trying to place the time of death by skin lividity, Jimmy said. Blood tends to seek its lowest level when pumping action ceases, like any other fluid. Yeah, sort of like that Drano commercial. That's the examiner's job, ain't it? He'll send out Norbert. You know that, Jimmy said, and Brent Norbert was never averse to a little help from his friends. Norbert couldn't find his own ass with both hands and a flashlight, Parkins said, and flipped his cigarette butt out the open window. You lost your screen off of this window, Matt. I seen it down on the lawn when I drove in. That's so, Matt asked, his voice carefully controlled. Yeah. Cody had taken a thermometer from his bag, and now he slid it into Ryerson's anus and laid his watch on the crisp sheet where it glittered in the strong sunlight. It was 7:15. I'm going downstairs, Matt said in a slightly strangled voice. You might as well go, Jimmy said. I'll be a little while longer. Would you put on coffee, Mr. Burke? Sure. They all went out, and Ben closed the door on the scene. His last glance back would remain the bright sun-washed room, the clean sheet turned back, the gold wristwatch heliographing bright hours of light onto the wallpaper, and Cody himself with his swatch of flaming red hair sitting beside the body like a steel engraving. Matt was making coffee when Brenton Norbert, the assistant medical examiner, arrived in an elderly gray Dodge. He came in with another man who was carrying a large camera. Where is it? Norbert asked. Gillespie gestured with his thumb toward the stairs. Jim Cody's up there. Good deal, Norbert said. The guy's probably jitterbugging by now. He and the photographer went upstairs. Parkins Gillespie poured cream into his coffee until it slopped into a saucer, tested it with his thumb, wiped his thumb on his pants, lit another Pall Mall, and said, How did you get into this, Mr. Mears? And so Ben and Matt started their little song and dance, and none of what they said was precisely a lie, but enough was left unsaid to link them together in a tenuous bond of conspiracy, and enough to make Bender wonder uneasily if he wasn't in the process of abetting either a harmless bit of kookery or something more serious, something dark. He thought of Matt saying that he had called Ben because he was the only person in Salem's lot who might listen to such a story. Whatever Matt Burke's mental failings might be, Ben thought inability to read character was not one of them, and that also made him nervous. All right, excelente. I am done. So I finished at the end of 6, so you are going to pick it up in your reading at, are you ready? Part 2, The Emperor of Ice Cream, Chapter 8, Ben 3, 7. Again, Part 2, The Emperor of Ice Cream, Chapter 8, Ben 3, Part 7, and your first line is by 9:30, it was over. Enjoy the rest of assignment number 8. Have a lovely day.